Okay, it's 1:30. I guess we'll get started and continue our discussion of Report Designer and show you some of the other symbols and features that we weren't able to go over the last time. And on the website it says Report Scheduler was part of this as well, so we'll spend a couple minutes looking at that, although I think we did a good job of touching on what it does in the first webinar here. If you'll remember, we had this really quite attractive report that we were working on in the previous webinar. I did a couple changes. I made it a landscape report so that we could see the matrix print out better, matrix table print out better than on a portrait-oriented report. That's about it. I think everything else is pretty much the same. We had the labels that we can add, the rich text that we can add and change the font text box. We had the smart labels where you could add labels that would change based on the report itself, like how many pages and the report time frame, so the start and end date, which is what this one is. We inserted an image. This was the only image we had, that's why it's so ugly. Create a table and a chart, and we put both of them on the front page. I've changed the orientation a little bit so that they do fit on a single page now. If you'll remember, one of the things that we do to create the table and manage it is drag it over. So the data table we would drag into the report. We click on it, and then we have the option right-hand side of the screen to show us what we can manipulate within the report. The columns were part of a collection, so we had to click on the ellipsis icon and add an average column so that we could select some data to display. From there, you would click in the report itself to select a station and a monitor. And again, we've manipulated the size of things by clicking on them and moving them about so that they suit our display needs. That's essentially what we did in the first webinar. So what I've done for this one, since we have several advanced reports to look at, is I've gone ahead and created them all, because that process is essentially the same, where you'll drag from the left-hand side into the report and then manipulate the properties on the right-hand side of the display. I added something that I didn't show you how to do before. That is the green plus sign icon here. So when you click that, you'll see the scroll bar shrinks a bit because now there's a brand new page to add to. This is a way to add more information on the display than what the page can hold. On the first page I added, I put in several reports. The first one is the matrix. When clicking on the matrix report and adding it, its information is mostly configured on the right-hand side. There is no drop-down for the station and the monitor, like in the data report that we saw before. So this configuration item here, when you click on it, it allows you to pick the station and the monitor. The reason for this is that the matrix report formatting does not allow you to see multiple monitors at one time. You can only see one station's monitor at a time. I did notice a small eccentricity here, which is something we'll have to get the labels changed on. The row date format and the column date format, they actually refer to the opposite, they say. So the column date format, where you would see the timestamp for the data, is at the top, and the column date format, as the label says, is really what each row has for the date in the matrix report. So that's a little usual. Clicking on this dot or these dots will allow you to set the formats themselves. So in the row, we only want to see the time, which is really the column, remember. We can set the date-time formatting here. And we can also elaborate on that by changing this information here. Clicking preview will allow you to see the current date time in the format that you've set. Say OK, and set that configuration. There are collections of rows and columns, just like in the data report. We can click on, you'll see that we can add a column for the maximum concentration and several other statistical parameters, such as the minimum or the date time of the minimum, the standard deviation, the count of records. These all are going to show up as a new column, which means that they reflect the data that's found in the row. So the maximum concentration will be the maximum concentration for that row of data, which would turn out to be a day of data. If we went to the rows collection, we would see that there are several other options which kind of match up in the same way. So minimum value, maximum value, standard deviation, valid data percent capture. Those would refer to the columns themselves. So this is a new row that refers to the columns, which is the time of day that the data was collected. Again, this is a matrix report. So each adding a row will create statistics that reflect the hourly data. Adding a column will reflect the daily data. We'll look at that in just a minute. What I'm going to do is go through a couple of these, and then we'll run a test report to look through them, and then we'll check out a couple more and move on that way. The missing data is a simple form. We can just, when we drag it over, I'll show you. You see there's just a station and a monitor to select to begin with. So in that case, we've selected, in this case, we've selected the Hilo and SO2. These additional columns are, as usual, added from the columns section on the right-hand side. And we've selected the date start, the date end, and the duration. This is a missing data report, so it has a list of the time periods where data was missing, and then groups them together in a duration-based report. So we'll see that. One of the important things for a missing data report is the list of statuses that you want to count as missing data. So there's this status list item, the right-hand side. And if we click on that, we'll just select the status that we want to count as missing data. It's important to note that you do have to click at least the no data, because that's a basic requirement. You can add additional statuses if you like. When you drag the table over, by default there is nothing selected. So you do have to open this, select the no data. That's about it for the missing data. Validation report. I did something interesting here which I wanted to highlight. So we'll click on rows to start with. And what I've done, there's one here called header, which of course means header. And what this is a text row where you can add your own textual section. So I've added it and moved it to the top. But if I click OK here, you'll see that I can go into these cells that are in the header row, and change what the display is for the stations. This makes them a header row, obviously, with the names of the columns. As far as the columns go, there are a lot of options, all of which are normally shown in the calibration report that's standard in Envista ARM. However, here's a place where you can trim out the ones that you might not want to see. So I've added to this list a status, and then I added the zero reference, the span measurement, and the span reference in that order, just to show that the status doesn't actually have to go at the end of the report. It can be the first column that you see. And then I skipped a lot of the other fields that may or may not be important, just to show that we can trim up the report and have it be very legible in the way that you will find it easy to read. So we'll click Cancel there, and this is another place where you would select a station and a monitor, and it would display the information for that set. So if we added another row, which would be just row type, you'd see that we'd have another option to pick a different station and a different monitor, but it would fit in the same constraints of the report that we've formatted already. That site there is about the only one that we have realistic calibrations from, so I'm going to leave that alone. Let's go ahead and run the report for this page at this time, and we'll see what it looks like. So I'm going to go into Invista ARM. If you'll remember, that's where you can run a on-demand report from this information. So it's under the Tools menu, Report Designer View. The group was Webinar, and we're working on the same report, Webinar 1. We're going to start with just looking at missing data. So I'm going to go to February 2nd, 2012. And it formats through as expected. We'll see here that there was no calibration data for that day. Again, this is a demo database, so it's kind of spotty in its data. For the missing data, we'll see that it does say that from midnight until through 7 a.m., there were 8 hours of missing data. We see in the data report above that is shown there. The matrix report also has that data as missing. And I have another day that we'll run to look at the calibration report. This is a day that had several records because the calibration was being, I think we actually just entered the data for this day for a test of some sort or another. Look at this day, the matrix is, the missing data is completely empty because there was no missing data, and there were 4 calibration records on that day. The precision of these values is something that is set in the report designer, so I'll show you where to do that in just a moment. And we can see that there was 3 attempts and then a valid attempt at the end. The designer, the precision of these fields are set in the for the columns. If we click on the 0, we could change this to say format 0.00. That would give us the additional precision that you report. We'll go ahead and save that. If you run, you can see that as so you'll see now that 0 column has the 2 decimal points of precision available to show you this report. That's the format item under each column's collect format. And the value format you can truncate or round as well. So on the second page, I've just the 2 reports. The summary table I'm actually very excited about because there's a lot of features in it. I've highlighted majority of them. I'm just going to elaborate on what I have here. Again, you'll just pick the station and the monitor. Those are the only 2 things that are shown when you drag the report over, so there's station and monitor, and that's it. And then you can add columns. Again, the collection on the right-hand side to the report. The basic first 4 here are ones that I've added: maximum, minimum, the valid percent, and the overall average for the reporting time period. There are two that are conditional data point counts based on the over or under a value. So I'm going to show you this in more detail. For instance, this one says how many data points were greater than the number 1. I configure that into the collection. Oops. And we'll say over value count. And if we scroll up to the top, there's an over and equal and an over value element that you can edit. So we can say everything over the value of 1 and don't consider over and equal. Only show me things that are exactly over. The same thing for the under value count. We scroll up to the top, we have the under value 100 and don't consider that are equal to 100. The next item in the summary table, which is pretty cool, is the percentile. So this will take or calculate the percentile that you've requested over the period of reported time. So in this case, we requested the 98th percentile. That is what is configured here for this column to say 98. You could add multiple percentile columns to this report. So you could have a 98th percentile column and a 90th percentile column if you are interested in doing that. You would just say add percentile and then push it up to where you wanted it to be. This one we're going to put above the 98th. We'll say that, just to be extremely different, we'll say this will be the 50th percentile. I know that's not a realistic usage, but for now. The count of records, the n value, will be the highest nth value. So in this case, we're asking for the highest 4th value. I'm sorry, this is the column I'm talking about. The highest 4th value, the 4th highest value. The count of records is just the number of total records during the period, and a standard deviation is just the standard deviation of those records. We'll click OK. You'll see we did add that percentile column, so in the header row, I'm going to add 50th percentile. Oops. And we'll save that. Before we look at that, let's do the windrows. The windrows is actually very simple to add and use because most of its features are listed out in this slide. You would just drag it over. If you click on station configuration, this is where you can select station name, the direction channel, the wind speed channel, and bases that you're going to use. Everything else that's in the windrows report from Vista ARM here too. So there's the calm and the number of classes, the highest value to report for wind speed, and the sectors. Here. Don't believe I saw any evolution rows features this time. Just a heads up. And there's no custom classes, so you couldn't set your own cut points for the wind speeds used. Other than that, the report will run and look in Vista ARM. We will save here. We can preview again. So in report 2, for wind data, I wanted to look at this date. We're going to look at the rows with this report. Oops, actually, one day off. See it divided up the wind into the sectors. Most of the data was a 1. I don't even think this was really a wind channel that I was using, but I did change some of the data points to reflect different directions. So we do have a wind rows from that. The summary table will run from a different day. We'll run that from the 2nd of February, I think. So here you'll see that it fills in all of these values for the summary table, which are those calculated parameters. The precision is something, again, that I've set. So 2.2 here, I had to go in and explicitly say I wanted that extra decimal point. Everything defaults to the display of whole numbers, except for the data tables, which are set to. Before I show Report Scheduler again, since it was on the title, are there any questions about the features or the reports or the tables that we went over today, or even refresher questions from the last session about a month or 2 months ago? No? Okay. Well, if something comes up by the end, let me talked about the way that we schedule the reports and have them sent out to through various methods, various users. So in here, we'll go to scheduled tasks. Sorry. The configuration. I guess I have to log in first. Okay. So properties configuration. And here we add a task, so we could add a new task and call this. We'll schedule it for daily run because it's a daily report, and we could say that it will run at 5 a.m. every day so that the report arrives to my desk when I come to the office before I get there. We don't need to run it on Sundays or Saturdays. The report date time offset, this says how far back to go. If it's all zeros, it would try to run the report for the day that you were coming in, and of course it would only have 4 or 5 hours of data at that time. Really, you wanted to look at the report from yesterday. So we'll say the day offset is 1. That will mean that when it goes to run the report, it looks back a day. You could also look at what happened last year on the same day if you did a year offset of 1 and a day offset of 0. There's lots of ways that you can manipulate the report that you're getting. The ways to transmit the report are below this. So we say that we want to select a printer to print to. We can put it directly to a path in our network. We could add an FTP site, which is this tab here. We could add an FTP site and transmit it to the FTP site on the schedule. This FTP export path is the folder directory that the file would go to on the FTP site. The ability to mail is this mailing list here. I don't know if we have any users. Yeah, I guess we can use my email address. So this would go by email at that scheduled time to the user that's listed here. So that would be printers, direct network export, transmit to an FTP, and send by email. That pretty much covers every major reporting method that's out there now. So this process covers its bases pretty well. The report scheduler currently isn't running as a service. It's an application, so it must be always running. We have request into Endotech to make it a service just like CommCenter, FTP import, export, and send alerts. And of course, we'll announce when that's available. That runs on a benefit from being a service. That's about it for the scheduler. Any questions on anything from today?
Nathan, it's Sonia from Montreal.
Bonjour, hello.
Hello. Just like last time, I'm really interested in this application. Do you still think it's not possible for us to have this?
I don't recall why I would have said that.
Because of Oracle or something like that? Some problems?
No, actually, one of the clients that we have that has the most interest in this is running Oracle. I don't think that there'd be any issues. Maybe we ran into some problems a long time ago when your database was still using commas instead of decimals or something like that. That might have inspired my comment. I would say that you are certainly able to try it out. We can schedule an install at some point, or Randy can schedule one with you. Okay?
Yes, please. And
okay,
thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? I got a chat message from you, Bill, but I don't see a question there. Oh, it's on its way. I will be patient. So when printing, how can we get a better resolution when printing the windrows is the question from Bill, California. Are you talking about printing that from Invista ARM, Bill? Page. From my example here, we call that my print preview. Well, it's smaller. The reason why it's so small is because it was just sharing the page with the summary table. If we take this out, you can, of course, you can increase the viewing portion of the chart, things like that. To your question, Bill? Are you printing from Report Designer or are you printing from Invista ARM? Are you printing from here or are you running a report window? Okay. So in Invista ARM, the graphs, most of the graphs, not the one that's showing me, of course. So generally speaking, the graphs in ARM scaled to what their viewable size is. So if we increase how the graph would save as an image or print in a similar size. The windrows is the same way. So what I think might, if you're printing directly from Invista ARM, maybe there's something I'm not aware of, but if you were to save it as an image first and then print from MS Paint or something like that, maybe that would improve it. Otherwise, I guess I'd like to see an example, or I'll try to make an example at some point here of a bad printout of the windrows in Invista ARM. Can't print right now, though, from the server, so we'll do that at another time. I'll keep you posted, Bill. I'll add it to your list I have in front of me. Any other questions? No? Okay. Everybody have a great day.